Hello and welcome back to Exothermic Plays Games. I'm Exothermic and the date today is Thursday, June 27th, 2024. I've been doing a countdown of my favorite video games of all time through each day of the year, and coming in at number 188 is Final Fantasy XIII. That's right, 2 Final Fantasy games in 3 days. It's been a busy time getting this stuff recorded. Final Fantasy XIII is a common answer for the worst game in the franchise, at least amongst the mainline numbered titles. While I agree it's far from perfect, it approaches the top half for me, so let's jump into it. The first thing I want to say is that the game is gorgeous. I remember when I first played it at release being absolutely blown away by the game's graphics and art direction, and I'm happy to report it has aged pretty gracefully. It's a good thing the game is pretty too, because you do a lot of watching it. Especially in the first half or so of the game, there's a ton of cutscenes, and that's basically the only dialogue there is throughout the whole game. You do get some very minor conversations while running around through the game, but that's all throwaway stuff. While I don't mind some cinematic storytelling, in fact, there's many games that do it fantastic and I love it, some of the conversations definitely could have been done on the way to the next objective point without disrupting the pace and flow of the game. On top of the cutscene problem, there's one of the most controversial parts of the game, the combat. I already explained this system when I ranked Final Fantasy XIII-2 as my 269th favorite game, but here's a quick overview. Each character can be one of 6 roles: Commando, Ravager, Medic, Sentinel, Saboteur, and Synergist. Medic is obvious. Sentinel is very defensive and taunts enemies to attack them instead of everyone else. Saboteur and Synergist weaken enemies and buff allies respectively. Ravager and Commando are your 2 damage roles, with Commando dishing out just pure damage and Ravager building up something called the stagger meter to drastically increase the damage for the rest of your team. Each role is leveled separately, gaining Crystarium points from combat that you spend on a web of stat boosts and new abilities. As for how the roles literally function in combat, if you look at the command menu, you'll see the very first thing is auto whatever, depending on your role. That does exactly what it sounds like. It plays the game for you.
This isn't a game.
No, that's for damn sure.
I'm here to defend this system, at least a little bit. I do want to mention that you can ignore the auto function and manually choose all of your abilities, though you have to get really good at menu navigation to not lose time from the action bar loading. The real reason I want to defend it is that the complaint of the game playing itself is, I think, more about a skewed perception than the actual reality of it. In most Final Fantasy games, average combat isn't especially strategic. Maybe you do have a strategy, but it's just rinse and repeat in every fight, and a lot of the grindier parts of the game are just spam the attack button until everything's dead. So far, I've ranked Final Fantasies 1 through 5, plus Final Fantasy VIII already, and I've gotta say, I really appreciated the function in the pixel remasters that automatically inputs your last given command for each character. Yes, you have to consciously make the decision for what that command originally was, but there's a bit more to 13 I haven't talked about. Paradigms. Pressing the left shoulder button in combat brings up the paradigm menu. Each character can be one of several roles, and you create a set of pre-made combinations that you can swap around in combat in real time. That is where the strategy is, and while I wouldn't want every game to be that, it's a nice change of pace that creates for some really exciting moments in the action, especially the boss fights. There's a handful of other occasional strategy nuggets too, like you can manually send abilities before your bar is finished loading in case you want to get them off just a little bit quicker. There's also the fact that the auto functions can only choose from your abilities, but not techniques. What's a technique? Well, it's a command that's not an ability. I know, very helpful. Techniques use a special resource that regenerates over time, up to 5 charges. Each technique may have a different cost of a number of those charges. Generally, my most used technique is Libra, which gives you information like elemental weaknesses for enemies you haven't fought before, which allows the rest of your team to fight them better. Later in the game, you do get access to some pretty powerful ones though that are more situational, like Dispelga, which removes most status effects from everyone, friendly or opposing, or Renew, which mass resurrects your party and heals them. Importantly, the techniques are also how you perform summons. I don't really love the summons in this game. The rest of your party goes away and you fight alongside the summon, which is kind of cool, but it has a timer that dwindles. You can also ride the summon, often like a transformer turning into a vehicle. That gives you another timer of sorts that's also a resource for attacks that you burn on abilities, and then you can do one big payoff ability at the end. While playing through the earlier parts of the story, the summons far outscale the power level of your full party, but they don't scale well into the late game, making them effectively useless after a certain point. I'm with them being a crutch to lean on when you need one most, but ultimately I just don't find the gameplay of them interesting. While you're fighting alongside them, you lose the whole paradigm system, which is what makes the combat interesting to begin with, and when you're riding them, you're just selecting some abilities that don't feel that different from each other, and then finally doing the thing that summons normally do in Final Fantasy games with a big fancy cutscene attack. I give them credit for trying to change it up, and it's an improvement from the even worse power scaling that existed for them in Final Fantasy XII, but I'd still rather just have the big story moment of unlocking them, and then just doing a thing. Perhaps more interesting and unique than just tons of damage when actually used, but a thing nonetheless, and then carrying on. Speaking of unlocking them from big story moments, that's the main thing I actually wanted to talk about with this game. I gave you the full rundown of the plot for Final Fantasy IV on Tuesday, but not only did I not have the time to replay the entire 30 to 40-ish hour story for this game, I also want to try doing something a bit different. The game is not presented to you entirely in chronological order. The parts you play are, of course, in order, but as your party is made up of what appears to be, at first, largely strangers, there's a lot of mystery to how they got there that's revealed in a series of out-of-order flashbacks as you play. I'm getting into the heavy spoiler stuff, so if you want to avoid that, check the description for the timestamp to skip it. Still here? We're good? Good. The game follows 6 protagonists with some tumultuous relationships. Really, the game is about these people overcoming their fairly enormous differences to coexist and work as a team, rather than the actual story of the world. First, some background. You live on an artificial world called Cocoon, which is crafted and is maintained by seeming gods called fal'Cie. Cocoon lies above a much larger planet called Grand Pulse. A pulse fal'Cie is discovered in Cocoon, and in panic, the fal'Cie creates what's called l'Cie. l'Cie are agents of a fal'Cie ordered to do their bidding after being given what's called a focus. If you don't perform the focus in time, you turn into a horrible, horrible monster. The problem is, it's not clear what the focus is, and is given in vague, dreamlike sequences. Sarah Farron is turned into a Pulse l'Cie, which starts all of this off. Even if you haven't played this game, you may remember Sarah from my video for Final Fantasy XIII too. I know, we're doing this backwards. When the government learns of Sarah, they order what's called the Purge, which is a thinly veiled mass execution of Sarah and everyone that comes into contact with her. Lightning is Sarah's sister and a sergeant in the military. A natural fighter and tactician, she's not letting the government just kill her sister. Likewise, Snow Villiers is Sarah's fiancé and the leader of Nora, a ragtag group of rebels resisting this crime against humanity. Shockingly, the impulsive, borderline criminal Meathead does not get along well with the orderly, disciplined, fast-tracked for officer military lady. Lightning is coming into the city to rescue Sarah via train disguised amongst the Purge victims. Joining her is Saz Katzroy, aka the best character in the game. I love you, Saz, you're amazing. Saz spends much of the game as the comic relief. He's a joking, goofy dude with a baby chocobo that lives in his hair, and really cartoonish attack animations. but he's also a really concerned father who just wants what's best for his kid. More on that in a bit. While they go directly to the heart of the operation with the train, Snow is fighting on the ground, helping to evacuate civilians. It's worth noting that neither Snow or Lightning know that the other is there fighting at all. Snow inspires some civilians to take up arms in the fight, including a woman ironically named Nora. Snow gets overwhelmed in the fight, and Nora sacrifices herself to save him. Unfortunately, her son, Hope, watches this happen and blames Snow for her death. Another stranger in the civilian group, named Vanille, tags along with Hope to keep an eye on him, but she does seem suspiciously motivated in them going to do whatever. Fast forward a bit, and these 5 all get trapped with the Pulse fallacy and get turned into l'Cie themselves. Sarah tells them to save Cocoon, and apparently she's completed her focus and turns to Crystal. Being Pulse l'Cie, the 5 are branded public enemies of Cocoon and must band together as fugitives. The banding doesn't last more than like 10 minutes. When the military shows up to take Sarah, Snow refuses to leave her and is taken prisoner. Meanwhile, Lightning and Hope go one way and Saz and Vanille go the other. You spend the next half or so part of the game more or less in these different groups with occasional brief reunions. Each character goes through some growth in their travels. I'll talk about Lightning and Hope first, because it's pretty straightforward and honestly, not that exciting. Hope wants to kill Snow because he blames him for his mother's death. Lightning is like, yes, small child, channel that anger and rage, fight the system, I won't stop you, I'm done being orderly and whatever. And then, over time, Lightning realizes that she's actually just angry at the world, and maybe telling a child that murder is sometimes what you gotta do, especially when they want to murder your future brother-in-law, maybe isn't the best. Meanwhile, Hope slowly realizes that he doesn't actually want to kill Snow, and that he's been pointing his anger at the wrong person. He figures this out just in time when Snow shows up to rescue them, because the military that captured him was actually a branch that defected. Snow is joined by our 6th protagonist, Awerba Yun Fang, another Pulse l'Cie, only she's actually from Pulse and is a proper enemy of Cocoon. It turns out that when Sarah completed her focus, it was to get the gang together so that they can, destroy Cocoon? We're the bad guys! Kind of. Not really. Cocoon be evil, though we still have to figure out a way to save the people that are on it. Meanwhile, Saz and Vanille have been on their own, shall we call it, enlightening adventure. After they split up from the rest of the group, Saz and Vanille head to the nearest city, Nautilus. Along their journey, we learn a lot about them, mostly from Vanille's curiosity. Saz has a very young son named Dodge. There is nothing in the world more important to him than Dodge, which makes it really weird they weren't together at all up to this point. When pressed on that, Saz reveals that Dodge is a Cocoon l'Cie. In fact, one power he was granted by the fallacy is that he can detect anything of Pulse origin. He's the reason the Pulse fallacy was found and that Sarah became a l'Cie and any of this ever happened. They were on a tourist trip, and Dodge wanted to see an actual fallacy, so Saz got to take him to go see one. Then there was a terrorist attack led by 2 Pulse l'Cie. One of them was actually Fang. But in the attack, the fallacy turned Dodge into a l'Cie in an effort to protect itself. This flashback is presented to the player from Vanille's perspective. They've been traveling together, and now Vanille knows she's the source of all of Saz's misery. She ruined his life and can't bring herself to tell him. Once finally in Nautilus, they have a fun day checking out a festival going on in the town and go to a theme park dedicated to chocobos. Turns out that they only did all of this because Saz had promised Dodge that he was going to take him to do it, and he still wanted to do it, even though Dodge couldn't be there. We also learn why Saz has the chocobo in his hair, Dodge loves chocobos, and he was going to give Dodge the chocobo, this baby chocobo chick, the same day as a surprise that he actually got turned into a l'Cie and was taken by the military. All of this reminiscing and learning about Saz's love to his son is crammed in here to make the next part sting even more. Here, I'll just play it and edit out the fights.
Daddy, I found you.
Huh?
Daddy, got you.
Dodge, why are you here?
Because you promised.
But how did you get here? Dodge! Wait! Come back! Dodge! Not you. Not you, Dodge.
The capture of undesirables. It seems that was your son's focus. Dodge fulfilled it admirably and served Cocoon in the process. You should be proud of him. Mr. Catsroy. Dodge was a great help. He could sense power of pulse origin. That let us monitor you. Words can't express our gratitude. The data he provided on enemy l'Cie was invaluable. And speaking of gratitude... We enhanced the surveillance footage from the energy plant.
Anything come back?
Ironic, isn't it? The very girl you're protecting is the one who stole your son. Hold. Shall we finish the job? Or would you prefer to?
Colonel Nabat, what now?
Follow them and observe. How often do l'Cie kill their own?
Benil.
My name is Herbe d'Avenir. I'm a l'Cie from Grand Pulse. And to everyone on Cocoon, evil. Shoot me for your son.
Don't you even! You think you die, and that's that? Hmm? You think you die and everything will be sugar and rainbows?
Then what can I do?
What do you want from me? If I can't live or die, what do you want me to do?
Don't ask me. You figure it out.
I don't know!
Neither do I. It's over. There's nothing to do. Shooting you won't help. Neither will living. worst, you freak!
A lot of things can be excused. Shooting kids ain't one.
Kindness like his, you don't forget.
Enough is enough.
Pretty powerful stuff, if you ask me. Since we're already spoiling everything, by the way, he wound up shooting next to him instead. I stopped recording with this scene because I was running out of time to get this video done, but there's still a handful of important things I want to touch on. After this, Saz and Vanille are captured and are being set up for public execution. The rest of the gang all go on a frontal assault and save them, then you escape to Grand Pulse. After probably 15 to 20 hours of gameplay, you can finally stop running through hallways. You may have noticed that pretty much all of the running around in this game is through very narrow spaces and corridors, even when you're outside. This is even true in cities where crowds of people functionally make up your walls. It's awful. It's one of the biggest complaints about the game. In cities, you can't even visit shops or anything. You basically buy everything at the floating computer save points like you're ordering from Amazon with drone delivery or something. All that changes when you get to Grand Pulse, a massive, sprawling world with wide open plains and mountains, and still no inhabited towns to explore. Well, it's an improvement at least. Your foray into Grand Pulse doesn't last forever, however, and after recovering down there and beating back the big bad, you mount a larger assault to take down the entire government of Cocoon and basically succeed, causing the artificial planet to start falling towards Grand Pulse. That would be, we'll say, catastrophic? Fang and Vanille complete their original focus and crystallize not only themselves, but the entire planet? I don't actually fully understand what happens there, but it sure looks cool, and the game is over. All in all, the game has what I think are some of the highest highs in the entire franchise and some pretty low lows. The late game combat is incredible, and while each character can swap around to all sorts of roles, they still feel really different, especially while you're still playing through the story. Each character learns their different skills in different orders, and often at very different parts of the game. For example, for most of the game, while Saz and Hope both can specialize in the synergist role, Saz focuses on offensive buffs and Hope focuses on defense. It does bother me that so much of the game is done with 2 character parties, as the 3 character party compositions are, I think, much more interesting. The lack of proper world exploration is troubling, and while Grand Pulse late in the game is a pretty good world to explore, the fact that you have to play for so long before you get to it is definitely problematic regarding the pacing. I do want to mention that even in some of the more linear parts of the game, there is still fun stuff to find. The visuals are great, the scenery is awesome, in fact they even sometimes call to it in the dialogue, a little on the nose, but whatever. And there's a lot of interesting enemy designs. For example, here is a Flan, which they usually have an elemental affinity for magic, but these ones are in the sewer of a city, and they're wearing, is kind of like, almost like grafted onto their bodies naturally, like reflector vests, and they are so cute. They're called Flanitors, and if there's a bunch of them, they just fight and try to heal each other, and they go wee woo wee. It's adorable. Ultimately, most of the characters are pretty compelling. and the absolute standout in Saz absolutely carries my opinion of this game, despite its flaws. Join me tomorrow where I talk about my 187th favorite game, where there is no way I can miss a 90% chance shot that many times.